Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. I have to tell you, I was just looking at my phone because I just got a text message from Ron Young. He said, have a great WYL. I could have said, what? There's a Wednesday Yachting Luncheon today? No. But anyway, I'm just so happy that you are here today to join us. I'm really looking forward to our speaker today. It's so much of what he says and does resonates with me. It's interesting. But our speaker is Rich Turner. He is a photographer, and he has lived for many years in the Delta, right here. Just, it's interesting because a lot of us at the Yacht Club think about the Delta because that's the location of our very own Tinsley Island. And so a lot of us get a chance to go on the waters through the Delta to get to Tinsley, so that's kind of fun. And yet there's so much about the Delta that I don't know. I talk about it a lot, about the weather in the Delta, but really, we were just talking about, where is the Delta exactly? What are the boundaries? It's a very interesting thing. And Rich has had such an interesting career. He was telling me he had worked for the Navy. He was actually an aerial photographer at the Navy. He is a photojournalist, having worked at a couple of different newspapers, and he also has his own company. So I'm really thrilled, and I cannot wait to see his pictures. He also is an author. He has a brand new book that's, I guess, coming out or about to come out. So we are in for a real treat. The new book is called Quiet Waters, The Beauty and Mysteries of California's Vast Inland Delta.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much. Just having so much fun over here, I almost forgot why I came. I'll try, actually. I had this rule for a long time. If it's not fun, I don't want to do it. And that's how I kind of started my career in the Navy. Got into photography quite by accident. I was just telling about the mental coin flip I had to do when I joined the Navy. I had the grand plan that I was going to be a mechanic because I had 3 years of auto shop in high school. I loved working on cars. And so time to join the military and get that out of the way and get on with my life. And during the boot camp days, they give you all these aptitude tests, and they want to find out what you can do best for the Navy and where you'd be best suited. And then they give you these interviews with a personnel officer, and he tells me that I can be a mechanic if I want to, because the aptitude is there. And but I have higher scores in another area, and he asked me if I knew what that might be, and I had no idea. He said graphics, and I was 19 years old. I didn't know what graphics was at that point. And he said, like photography. I said, oh, well, I had 3 years of photography in high school as well. He said, oh, great. He said, your scores in that are even higher than your mechanical scores. Okay, so I became a photographer quite by accident, a little bit like falling into a vat of chocolate. And within a year of joining the Navy, I was doing work like this. This is an A-4 Skyhawk firing a Shrike missile on a land target in China Lake Weapons Testing Center in Southern California. And I'm flying in a similar airplane. The only difference in my airplane is it has 2 seats. This one has 1. And this is the same type of aircraft that John McCain was flying when he was shot down in Vietnam. Same type of aircraft, not the same aircraft. But so anyway. Now then, after 2 years at NAS Lemoore doing work like this, I volunteered for Operation Deep Freeze. It's the Navy's support system for United States Antarctic Research Program, and this airplane became my home away from home. I did aerial photo mapping. And a story I like to tell, and I wish I had the presence of mind. Actually, if I even had the presence of mind, I probably wouldn't have been able to do this anyway. But we would take scientists out into the middle of nowhere, drop them off with CBs or construction sailors, construction battalion it stands for. But with the construction guys, they would put up huts and their equipment, and they would stay there in the middle of nowhere, Antarctica, doing research. And then we would come back in a week or two or whatever and pick them up and take them back. But anyway, we would land on our skis. You see the skis on that bottom of that airplane. And we would coast to a stop. And it was my job to jump out of the airplane and on this long headset cord and keep them. We had to keep the props turning, and I had to make sure that nobody would walk into the props, because it's kind of hypnotic when you're walking around something like that, and it's real easy to be sort of mesmerized and lose your orientation and stuff. So that airplane's footprints were actually before mine, but my footprints in that part of the world, the planet Earth, could conceivably be the first human footprint. I felt like Neil Armstrong, you know. But you know, here I am, a photographer, but it was doing a different kind of photography, and my job was to keep people alive and things like that. So anyway, it's a true story. I just don't have a picture to prove it. Then I got out of the Navy and I went to work at a small town paper where I grew up, Roseville Press-Tribune. Photojournalism was something I really wanted to do. I applied for every newspaper, at every newspaper in California after I got out of the Navy, and I had a little bit of a portfolio, nice pictures, but every photojournalist that I talked to said, yeah, they're great pictures, but come back when you're a photojournalist, you know. Well, the newspaper in Roseville hired me. And the publisher there, her name was Carmela Martin. I'll never forget her. She gave me a chance to prove myself when nobody else would. And I worked there for 3 years. And with her blessing, I moved on to a bigger newspaper, the Stockton Record. And this motel here, I think of it as a place where Tom Joad may have slept. I'm not sure. But it's long gone now. But it was a place that I had driven by many times, and thinking, well, the light's not right. I've got to take a picture of that sometime. It's on Highway 12 in the little town of Terminus, if you know the Delta region. But I thought, you know, one day I was driving by it. I was always in a hurry, and the light wasn't any good. But something told me I better stop and shoot a picture of it. So I did. Put the negatives in a file sleeve and just never thought about it for a while. And another time, the next time I drove out there, it was bulldozed over, gone. So there was a lesson to me as a photographer. If you see something that you want to photograph, don't say I'll come back and do it later, because there are no guarantees. So anyway, that's the Terminus Motel. Do any of you remember Humphrey the whale? Humphrey the wayward whale? My own title of this, I don't know if we used it as a caption in the paper, but we're gonna need a bigger boat. But that's Humphrey, and he's almost grounded in a little slough north of Rio Vista. And the scientists that were on the boat, several boats really, but they were trying to turn him, they finally got him turned around and headed back out to the ocean. But that was a big worldwide story for, actually, it was 2 or 3 weeks that he was lost. And he finally got him back out the gate, Golden Gate, but a few years later, he did it again. You remember? Yeah. So he was kind of a goofy dude, but anyway, so yeah, he loved the Delta, yeah. So anyway, I'm just showing you a few black and white journalism type of pictures, but this is Delta. I kind of started getting to know the Delta when I moved to Stockton, and it kind of started getting under my skin. I just really, something about it that I felt good about being out there. It's just a different place to me for some reason. And I'd been around and all, you know, but the Delta just had a certain charm I liked. And this is actually this type of airplane. It's called an AgCat. It's actually the first airplane designed from the ground up to be a crop duster. Before this airplane, it was the old World War II trainers, the Stearmans, that were refitted to do this job. But this airplane was made from the ground up. This is a Delta, I think it's a potato patch. And then, I really, as a black and white photographer, my whole career in newspapers was black and white. They were only talking about doing color reproductions by the time I left in 1990. And so we didn't have a chance to work with color as photographers. But I started carrying a camera with me that was dedicated to, it was always loaded with color, even if I was working on the job for the paper, because I would see things like this. And I think, well, I got this published as a black and white, and it looked pretty good in black and white, really, because the tones are all there and all that. And then, you can, we have a meteorologist in the room here, so editors always like what they called weather art. If they got space on a page, go out and get me some weather art, that kind of thing, and have it back here in 10 minutes. But, so I was always looking for pictures like that. We kind of call it enterprise, things that editors can't assign because who knows what's going to happen. So this is stand-up poplar trees that I kind of fell in love with. This is like the first time I saw them. It's like, oh man, this is really something. It's 20 minutes from my back door, and so I'd start frequenting this place, and I have a whole decades-long series of these trees, but I'll just kind of cut to the chase for time constraints. This is the same area about 10 years later, maybe actually 20 years later, and that dredge there is doing, trying to dredge out the channel a little bit, and down to one tree after that 10 poplar trees standing in a row. I'll get to it. And now they're all gone. That's the same spot. So it's a changing landscape. Most landscapes do, I suppose. But it's kind of fun to look back on the sequence of things in certain places that we like. And then in what was the year? 1978, I got an assignment to follow some asparagus cutters out in the Delta. And then in 2016, I got the idea, I wonder what's changed, So I called a farmer that I know, and he gave me permission to come out and hang out and photograph his guys too. And I wanted to do a story about what has changed, and basically not much other than the economy, because the asparagus grown in the Delta is some of the best in the world. I don't know why. Maybe it's the soil, the rich peach soils or something. Maybe it's the farming skills, I don't know. But when I was a kid growing up, I hated asparagus because, all I knew was canned asparagus, that gray limp stuff that comes in a can. I came to Stockton, and long about April, people started talking about asparagus like some people talk about the opening of spring training in baseball. I can't wait for it, But so anyway, I thought I'd do a then and now kind of comparison. And asparagus is one of those crops that's just labor intensive. There's no way around it. People have tried to develop mechanical harvesting, but it's always going to be a very expensive crop. And it's just a hands-on kind of thing. And it's actually skilled labor because they have to know, which spears to cut and which not to cut, because they'll come back in 2 days and there's another crop coming up out of the dirt that is ready to cut again. And I started to tell a story over here at the table, but I'll do it now. There was a farmer that I was talking to back in the 70s that said that he was bragging about his asparagus. And he said, I like to come out here late at night. The work's all done. I sit in my truck. And he says, if the wind's not blowing and it's really quiet, I can hear those things pop out of the ground. And of course that's a joke, but then he thought about it, and then he kind of gestures at this whole area, and he says, but it may not last forever. And he's talking about the politics and pumping too much diverting too much water to the south and things like that. And and those threats are still there. In fact, probably never will go away. But again, then and now, and the packing sheds are a little more modern now too, But what has actually changed since 2016 when I did that is there is hardly any asparagus being grown in the Delta now because of the cost. And I talked to some people at Victoria Island Farms, and they used to be heavily into asparagus, and I talked to one of those people, and she said that they gave it up. They just couldn't make it pencil out because south of the border in Mexico, they'll pay their guys maybe $10 a day. They pay their people here in California, at the time when I was doing this story, $10 an hour plus benefits. So markets, grocery stores, well, what are they going to buy? Who's going to buy the most? Well, it's too. So the economy has just all but killed Delta asparagus. This is the port of Stockton. When I moved to Stockton, I knew there was a port there, but I didn't know much else. And years later, when I started my own business, they actually became a client, and they were a very good client for about a decade when I was doing all of their annual reports and everything else they needed. And they were very busy with paperwork and photography during the 90s because the Navy used to be the owner of the Port of Stockton, and they were turning over that property to the Port of, the Navy was leaving. And there was all kinds of photography and documentation that needed to be done. So that was a good place for me to be for about a decade, in addition to doing their annual reports and stuff. And now I've come to find out, in recent years, about 280 ships a year call on the Port of Stockton. So if you're cruising through the Delta, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be able to see a ship coming or going. I mean, when you think of it, it's almost 300, we'll round the numbers up. So that's 600 times that a ship is going to be moving through the Delta. So, chances are good you're going to see one. You won't see the water it's in because you're, they're down below. But there's lots of shipping activity. You were asking me what I like to photograph. So one of my favorite things is shooting moving targets, anticipating where they're going to be, what's going to make a good shot. I was out just cruising the Delta, and I saw the white superstructure of that ship way off in the distance, and I knew he was coming my way, and I thought, wow, the weather's changing, and do I have time to wait for him, da-da-da-da-da. So I had time to look for a pretty good spot to get a picture of him rounding the bend. That tells the Delta story. I mean, a ship in the water can be a ship in the water anywhere, but I think this has a little more something to say about the Delta. And this is this is the Antioch Bridge. And, a lot of my work, probably more than I would like to admit, is serendipity. Right place, right time, ready. Like a baseball shortstop, if you're in position and you're ready, if he hits it to you, you have a chance of catching it, But if you're not ready, forget about it. But so I was flying on some other assignments, and I saw this ship moving, and so I said, well, let's go over here and do some photography here. And I kept this guy in the back of my mind, and so let's go look at him now. And I saw Antioch Bridge way over there. Well, let's wait for him to get to the Antioch Bridge. So that's how that happened. And this was another time where I was shooting skylines of San Francisco for a steel company. And there's always ships moving in the bay, which is really cool. But I saw this guy, and I thought, I got to spend a little more time in this helicopter and get what I want. Client will get what he wants too, but I got to get some stuff I want here. So we played with this ship a little bit. So this is one view of it, and this is another view of it. And it's funny, this was a serendipity thing, and I got back and I was looking at the take, and I thought, MOL shipping, So I found him, called him, showed him the picture, and they liked it, and they became a client. So never know what can happen. And this was name of this ship is the Anchorgrot, and this was back when I was doing all their annual reports and all of that. And the deputy director of the port called me and said, hey, Rich, the skipper of the Anchorgrot is a friend of the port director's, and the port director wants you to get a helicopter today, now, and follow that ship out of the port. I couldn't guarantee it. It was on the 4th of July. Well, I had a good friend who was my helicopter pilot, and he said, hey, I'm so glad you called. My in-laws are visiting today. And he said, this is my excuse out of here. I'll meet you at the airport. So we were pals for a lot of reasons. Okay, so by now that photographers are interested in good-looking shapes, interesting shapes, and again, I was in a helicopter, and it was on this same day, the same day that this ship was photographed, and we were coming back over Mandeville Tip, and Baron Hilton does his annual fireworks shows. And I saw this a bunch of boats rafted up, and I saw some very interesting shapes that I wanted to photograph. I thought those were some really nice-looking boats. And since we're a boating crowd today, I thought I'd throw in a few boat pictures. So, that sunset, we think it's really pretty, but that was back in the 1990s, and we had a bunch of wildfires that summer, and they make for nice sunsets, even though the air's a little thicker than we would like it.
That's no filter.
What's that?
No filter.
Oh, no, that's just the way it looked. Yeah. Filters get in the way. I mean, I use a polarizer, but I don't mess with filters really. And this is one of those things of anticipation again. And my wife and I like to go on Delta walks, and we don't have to go far from our home to do that. And this is in the winter, obviously, and we pulled up on this levee, and I saw this guy coming our way with a spinnaker. I knew he was coming towards us. And, I just looked at my wife, and before I could even say anything, she says, "Go ahead. I know, I'm used to it. Go ahead." So I parked the car, and I started running up and down the levee like a crazy ape, And I saw this vision in my head. The sun is going down. I've got to get that sun in between that spinnaker and the mast. And so that was the result right there. And, my wife, Joanna, has come to understand that, that's going to happen once in a while. So she's pretty tolerant. And this is another serendipity surprise for me. This was near Stockton, and this is a sailboat race called the Delta Ditch Run. Some of you might have heard of it. Originates at Richmond, I think, and it's about an 8 or 10 hour pull upriver, and they're on their home stretch headed toward the Stockton Sailing Club in this photograph. So it looks like a pretty tight finish there. And here's another picture of best laid plans. I ended up calling this photograph Yellow-Eyed Cat because now there was a big storm that blew in overnight. It would rain like crazy, and I thought, I got up the next morning and I saw the sky kind of breaking. I thought, I'll just go out to see what's going on in my beloved Delta. And I saw this composition in my imagination as I was driving by on the levee. And I went down and making the composition, and all of a sudden I feel this rubbing against my legs. And I look down, and his cat is looking up at me. He's like, "You got chicken?" Something. He just wanted a treat. And I'm kind of annoyed because, hey, I'm trying to do something here, kid. Go away, you bother me, kind of thing. I wasn't mean to him or anything. It just, he's distracting me, and the floating dock, and I'm trying to shoot slow film and stuff. And then as he started walking away, I just cranked off one shot, and the other pictures don't mean a thing to me. This is the one that does. He's a good kitty. And I call this Rivers Run Through It. And I use this picture sometimes to discuss subsidence in the Delta. When you look at the water, it's at sea level, basically. It's flowing toward the sea, but it's basically at sea level. You look at the surrounding land, it's about 20 feet below. And the reason for all of that is the peat soils over the last 100 years of being cultivated have compacted, and it's man-made subsidence in the peatlands of the Delta. And so there you go. Let's see. This is called the black hole habitat. It's actually, if any of you have heard of Dino Cortopassi, he's one of the Delta heroes. He's deceased now. But it's used to be called the Cortopassi Duck Club, Black Hole Duck Club. But now it's a habitat preserve, and it's a perfect example of how habitat and commercial agriculture can peacefully and thrive together, you know. So more serendipity. How about that? In fact, I used to have a big typewritten sign of serendipity over my monitor because I believe in it. This is an island that had been flooded for 6 months. This Lower Jones Tract, the levee broke in 2004. And it had been underwater for about 6 months until they could reclaim it. And this excavator was redigging an irrigation canal and thereby unearthing all kinds of treats for several different kinds of birds. They call this one feeding frenzy. And the Delta is a haven for birds, especially in the wintertime. If you're not a bird watcher and you start driving around the Delta in the winter, you're going to become one because they're everywhere, where it's a flyway from Alaska down to Mexico and stops in between. So especially for sandhill cranes. And every year along about November they start showing up, and then they're here until about the end of February. And you can just count on some locations that you're going to see some sandhill cranes if you know where to go. And this is a picture that my wife likes to take some credit for this because she's a plein air painter. She's a very good painter. And she'll ask me sometimes to just do a reference shot. Could you just give me a reference shot just so I can have a little, it's kind of like visual note taking, because she might want to paint a scene. So she said, in this case, she said, aren't you going to shoot that? And there was a bunch of cranes. It was a real messy thing. And I said, what am I going to do with it? She said, well, just give me a reference shot for me. So I had to get out of the car and get my camera and get the right lens on and all that stuff, And so I got what she wanted. And as I turned in a little different direction, this pair was standing there like that. And so I shot that and didn't say much to her, showed it to her later. And so she takes credit for the picture. That's okay. But I got the title of Sandhill Crane Festival Artist of the Year because of that. So she gets credit for some of that.
Is that reflection natural?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You mean their reflection in the water? Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It looks like the paintings.
Well, yeah, and that's sometimes I like that in a photograph. It's not the sharpest picture I've ever shot, but in this case, I think it's okay.
Oh, it's neat that way.
Yeah, I like a painterly effect sometimes, and other times I'll use that as an excuse. If I make a mistake and it's a little bit out of focus, I can say it's intentional. The artiste here.
Was it dusk? Is that what?
Well, it's late in the day. It's in February, something like that, so it's hazy. Fog. You know how the air is thick? There's no direct sunlight. It's almost breaking through, but you can see the light on their front there, where it's a little bit of specular reflection.
You can tell the sun is low.
It's very low, very low. And it just so happened that the water was pretty still. When I first got out of the car, the wind was kicking up, and so the water was choppy. So it's not pretty. It's just it doesn't make good pictures. Let's put it that way. But as I started looking around, it calmed down, and you don't know. They're just gusts of wind. And that's the other thing that changed from the time I thought, I don't want to take that picture, to when I had the camera in my hands and it was ready for a picture. Excuse me. And this is a great egret, and you just don't know what you're going to find. And this is funny too. A local group of artists got together and wanted to paint this, and now there's a big, 8-foot mural on the outside of one of the buildings on Pacific Avenue. And it's a derivative of this, and I get all the credit for the original, of course, but it's real fun to drive by there and, oh, look, everybody sees that. So, kind of fun. I mentioned Terminus before. This is right near where that other picture was taken, but a different day, of course. And so this new book I'm working on, excuse me, I do a lot of, scenic work, obviously, and moving targets of ships and, just whatever catches my eye. And for decades, I've been doing that about the Delta, and I've done a lot of art gallery shows and corporate decor jobs and things like that. And so I'm kind of getting that moniker of the Delta photographer, which I'm pretty proud of, actually. But of all these things I've done, I think, well, the thing that's missing is what I want to do next, and that is the people idea of the Delta. Because, people think, you drive by the Delta and you think, well, yeah, so what? Who cares? People in Southern California just want the water. We know it as something much more special, and that's the story that I want to tell in Quiet Waters, and I'm very much in progress with that. Excuse me again, sorry. So, real people of the Delta, this couple, these horses, Doc and Katie are the horses' names, and these are friends of mine, but they happen to live on Roberts Island in the Delta, and we were out for a wagon ride one day. The wagon we were riding on is about 125 years old. It's just really cool to meet people who are really special to the Delta, and without them, the Delta wouldn't be what it is. And so this book is going to be telling those stories, as well as I'm hiring lots of writers. And you mentioned Tinsley Island. I'll get to that in a little bit. I guess I'll remind myself with a picture. Excuse me. Should have brought a ton of water up here with me, but anyway. Okay, so here's a dying breed. Wooden boat guys. A friend of mine is the director of the Delta Chamber of Commerce, and he just sold his Stevens, something like a 36-foot Stevens yacht. He introduced me to this guy, and I was talking to him, and he says, yeah, I'm kind of a dying breed. Boats are fiberglass or aluminum now, and I guess there's some wooden boat builders, but they're few and far between. He said when he's finished, ready to retire, he doesn't know of anybody that wants his business. He has employees, but he says nobody wants to run the business. There's too much risk there. But these are stories that I want this book to tell, as well as I'm hiring writers to do other stories. I've got a historian working on Prohibition era in the Delta. Do you know the area of Ryde? Anybody? It's south of Walnut Grove. And there's the Ryde Hotel. Well, during the Prohibition, there was a speakeasy. Politicians, governors, police chiefs would come down and break the law. And it is said, and by several different sources I've found, that there was actually a tunnel under the levee. It's Highway 160 that drives right in front of the Hotel Ryde, or the Ryde Hotel. And they dug a tunnel under that boats could come up in the middle of the night and offload liquor and take it through the tunnel and then giddy up in the middle of the night and get away. So that's the legend of the Ryde Hotel. And the Ryde Hotel is still thriving. It's a still thriving business. Now, I was having lunch with a friend of mine up in Clarksburg, and he says, hey, or actually I was interviewing him. He says, come on, I want to take you to lunch. And we drove 3 miles outside of Clarksburg, and we had a nice lunch in this little restaurant. And we were leaving, and he says, oh, come on, I want you to meet somebody. He drags me back into the kitchen, and there's Juanita, the woman on the left there, and she's 80-something, and running the kitchen still. Her and her husband, Shorty, immigrated to the United States through El Paso in the 1950s with very little money. They had they worked their way into Texas for a while, and they happened to have an uncle that was somewhere up in the Clarksburg area, and so they moved up there for better work opportunities. And Shorty became a farm worker. Juanita worked the farms. They had 7 of their own children, and they raised a niece. So they raised 8 kids on farm worker wages. And after about 20 years, most of the kids are gone, and they all graduated from colleges, and they were scattered all over the United States. And I kind of think of this as the American dream. But so when Shorty was obviously still alive, there was this little rice and bean shack outside of Clarksburg. And he's getting a little tired of farm work. He made foreman of this big farm operation, and he kind of had a dream of owning this little place. Maybe he could make a living with it. So they bought it, and just a little beans and shack place. And she wanted to expand the menu, and she was telling the story through him. She barely speaks English to this day. She's very shy, but ran the kitchen. Now Shorty was the gregarious one. He was the guy. He was the front of the house guy, they would call it in the restaurant business. He'd keep people happy and entertained and coming back. And she wanted to expand the menu. Well, we got to do more than beans and rice. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want change. And she just said, well, if they don't like it, we don't have to keep doing it. Let's just try it. So they actually made a pretty good menu, and people started coming. One day the place burned down, and that's Gilbert, her son, number 5 child. He's a lawyer in Sacramento, grew up there in Clarksburg, graduated Clarksburg High School, and he was telling this story. He's going to help his dad. Well, Dad, where's the insurance papers? We'll get this going. And his dad just shook his head. He said, I was putting you kids through school. I couldn't pay insurance too. Okay, so it sat for a while, and the people of Clarksburg liked these people so much they were talking about having a fundraising drive. Well, they didn't have to do that because they found a friendly banker in the Bank of Stockton, and people went to bat, co-signing, things like that. They were able to rebuild, not just rebuild, but build this place, which is a far cry from the beans and rice shack that they had. Another charming part of the Delta, people, right? I'm doing a little story for my online magazine, soundingsmag.net, and I wanted to talk about the wind turbines that we see all over the Montezuma Hills. And I just wanted to, tell that story, find out a little bit about it. And I needed some quotes from some people who live out there. And so I'm driving around. It's 100 degrees. Nobody's stupid enough to be out in 100-degree heat. And there was nobody I could just even, there wasn't a soul moving except stupid me. And I got into this little town of Bird's Landing, and on one of the corners was this little house. It had a sign on it that said Shirley's Tavern. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm thirsty, I'm hot, let's go see. And I walked in, and I could see that it was open through the screen door, but nobody was in there. And I opened it up, and I walked in, and nobody was there, peanut shells all over the floor, and just kind of this charming place you see here. And about that time, Shirley walks out. This is Shirley of Shirley's Tavern. And I told her what I was doing, and she said, well, can I get you something? I said, please. She brought me a cold beer. And I asked her if we could talk, and we did for a couple hours. And she told me stories about these wind turbines and stuff. Charming as all get out, and this is part of what I love about the Delta. And let's see. This is Mike Campbell, and he's the guy who took me out to Shirley's Tavern. So, and this guy was born and raised in Clarksburg, just south of Sacramento, and he made Eagle Scout in this Scout Lodge there in Clarksburg. And then when he grew up, got out of the Army, got out of college, and he came back to live in Clarksburg, he became the Scoutmaster, and he took over from the Scoutmaster that helped him get his Eagle badge. So here he turned around and helped a lot of kids get their Eagle badges. And now he doesn't do that anymore. He's just a mover and shaker, and he just finished a big project of moving a 150-year-old schoolhouse to a better location so it wouldn't flood and all that kind of stuff. So these are things that are going on in the Delta that I'm going to tell about in this new book, plus other writers who are going to help me tell stories, historical stories and such like that I'm hiring. And these are the wind turbines of out in the Collinsville area and Bird's Landing area. And let's see here, we got Oh, this is a lesson. Yeah, this is a lesson in what's the best camera. People are always asking me. And my best answer is the one closest to you. Yeah, exactly. So my wife's a plein air painter. We went out and parked somewhere. It's the Cosumnes River Preserve. You can park and go for these little hikes and see some nice wildlife if you're lucky. So she's painting somewhere. And I saw, I'm just going to go for a walk. And while she's painting, so I walked about a quarter of a mile away. And I saw this, and it's like, oh man, my camera's. By the time I get back here with my camera, it's going to be changed. And so I just pulled out my little iPhone 5, and I shot this. And you can't see it on that screen. Maybe you can, but in the just above the water line on the right-hand side, there's a flight of ducks taking off. Do you see those? Pretty amazing. Well, I didn't even see it until I put it in the computer and started editing it. That's my iPhone 5. I'm shooting an iPhone 12 now, and they're up to iPhone 16 now. So who needs a real camera, right? But anyway, that's what I had in my pocket. And of course, I shoot a lot of things still with a real camera and this is another iPhone shot. And just a sunset in the Delta right after a storm. And no tricks, nothing, just pull the camera out of my pocket. And wife and I are walking along the levee, and she'll just say, okay, catch up when you're done. Just,
That's an iPhone?
I'm saying iPhone.
Out of your pocket?
Yeah, this one's a 12, but yeah, iPhone, yeah. This is not an iPhone shot. But the Walnut Grove Bridge, you see the TV towers there on the right-hand side. And okay, Tinsley Island. Maybe some of you people here know a little bit about Tinsley Island. I know the history because of what I read. Well, I only know what I read on your website, truly, the club's website. And it's colorful history, but I want to tell more about it. If you know anybody who was involved in the acquisition of it in the 60s, actually 1958, I think, the island was bought for about $10,000 or something, which then was a lot of money. But members here pooled their own money to buy it. And it was just a berm. It was just an island. There was nothing there. Well, now you know what it is. And this is Tinsley Island looking north toward more of the Delta. But I want to tell the story of Tinsley Island through the eyes of maybe somebody who was around. So please put the word out that I'm looking for somebody who's going to help me. And if they're a writer, so much the better. Let's do an essay about Tinsley Island, because I think that there's going to be a lot of history that we don't know about until we get people who've been there helping tell the stories. You're a journalist, you know what I'm looking for. So please help, and other stories that you might think of, interesting people, interesting projects going on in the Delta. I want to tell the story. I want this book to be a reference for decades to come. It's a coffee table book, big, expensive production. We've raised a lot of money to do it. It's a nonprofit project in partnership with the San Joaquin County Historical Society and Historical Museum. So we're partners, and the money goes to them, so it's tax deductible, but then they have contracted with me to create this new book because they know it's time for it as well. The books that I've seen on the Delta, they fall into a couple of different categories, and that is pretty picture books, which I've done a lot of. I'm guilty of that. Little essays that go with the pictures and stuff, but I think there's more stories to tell. I don't think there's an end to all the stories that we could tell, and that's what this Quiet Waters book is all about, and I'm right in the middle of production of it, and we're still raising funds for it. So that is that, as we say. So.
There we go. That was fascinating. Really interesting. I was looking forward to seeing your pictures, and you did not disappoint.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you can tell I'm having a good time.
Well, that's not one of the keys to life, finding something where you find purpose and meaning and it's fun.
Well, people have asked me, I guess I might look like I'm near retirement age. I don't know. When you're going to retire? And I say, whoa, what does that mean? Because I've worked in this industry, this wonderful storytelling industry since I was in the Navy. Why quit? I mean,
I was listening to a podcast yesterday about longevity and how really traditionally people kind of worked, if they were in agriculture, they worked all their lives. They didn't retire. And there was kind of an artificial construct. There were two times in American history, the FDR time and then a little bit later when they instituted more social safety net for elders. But really, traditionally people didn't necessarily retire. And now that we live so much longer and we live healthier with that health span, a lot of us still feel really motivated to keep going, right? I think we had this conversation a little earlier this afternoon. But so it's interesting that you continue to work and you aren't necessarily planning to retire because this is what you do. This
Right.
is what floats your boat. This is what is exciting and gives purpose.
Right. Well, I've gotten to a point, thankfully, that I can pick and choose the commercial jobs I want to do, and there's not many that I want to do anymore because this is my baby. This Delta thing. I've come to love the Delta, and I'd like to help preserve it if it's possible. And I'm not. I don't want to be, a political soapbox or anything like that. I just love it. And I think one of the best ways to spread the word is to just show it for what it is. And that's what I'm trying to do with these pictures and stories that go with it and hiring good writers to tell stories and that sort of thing. So that's what's motivating me now.
What is the Delta? Where is it exactly? This is
Well,
so you could say the confluence of the San Joaquin
two
River,
main
Sacramento River.
Yeah, two main river systems. They call it the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. Those are the two main rivers, but the McCollumney, Stanislaus, there's something like 5 rivers. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz. But
No,
anyway,
I didn't mean it that way. But
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I can't name them. I try to name them for myself. But
Question.
Anyway. Yeah. Yes.
In your book, do you show or discuss any of the origins of the Delta going back to the turn of the century and in the 20s when it was a agricultural steamboat barge type of thing, not resorts?
Thank you.
Why
Yeah.
the Delta and where it came from to what we see today.
Exactly.
Great question.
It is a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. Yes, is a simple answer. I have historians that are clamoring to write about this. One of the guys, his family came to the West in covered wagon. Late 1800s, wagon train. From, Ohio or something like that. I have to reread his story. But they settled in the Delta, and they farmed the Delta until a major flood. I think it was 1902 or 1892. Dates escape me, but and it flooded them out, and they ended up settling then in the Ripon area. Now that's I'm going to call that recent history, but before that, it was highly populated by Miwoks, Yuroks, Indians, American peoples, Native American people. And we want to tell that story as well. So I'm looking for writers who know that part of the world or heritage. And so, yes, this book is going to be filled with stuff like that. And that's not the only. Yeah, and what's your next question?
Yeah, question again. Going back to the origin of it, sort of in the late 1800s, when the Chinese finished the railroad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, lock was developed.
And the Reclamation Act, I think at that time, I'm not sure when, 1880.
Yes,
So when they created the levies
that's right.
Can you repeat the question because we don't have a microphone on him?
to the Chinese labor that came off of the labor from the railroad coming over the Sierras.
Right, the railroads were finished, and so they went to work in the levees. A lot of those levees are hand labor.
So we're talking about the Chinese immigrants who had finished working on the railroads, and you were talking about the origin. But
Yes.
please go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, well, so I'm not a historian, but I know a little bit about it. But then they started working on the levees, and then, of course, farming, and that was the early beginnings of cultivated delta. And then they started cutting the channels deeper, for bigger ships to come in. In those days, sloughs were named like Little Potato Slough. Well, guess why? And there was a Chinese settlement on Brack Track. One of my historians has written about that. His family has farmed Brack Track for several generations. And he took me out there to way away from one of the main roads. And you wouldn't know it, but there was a Chinese settlement on Brack Track, which is bigger than Locke was. It's all gone now. But they would farm those areas, and boats would come in and take the harvest to San Francisco and to Stockton. You know, the gold rush, Captain Weber got rich selling equipment to the miners, not mining himself. But that was the beginning of the transportation to and from Stockton from the bay. And those channels weren't cut straight enough for big ships until, you know, gosh, I think the first commercial ship that called on the port of Stockton was something like 1926. So that's pretty recent history. So yes, this book is going to have essays throughout it talking about these very things. And the current stories that I showed you some of in those pictures.
So you mentioned that Chinese settlement, that there's no evidence anymore.
Well, there's, if you know where to look, there's some pilings that'll stick out of the water, and that's pretty much left. That's all that's left.
Can we get the microphone?
Yeah, here. He was out of the room.
I know.
Do you want to speak the question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
The town of Locke up in Sacramento is still part of one of the old, and I believe there's still some history in that town of the old Chinese settlements that
Yes,
if
yes.
you go up there, you can still go to a place called Al the Wop.
Yes, Al the Wops has been there a long time.
Yes.
And Al, I forget his last name, but he was kind of people affectionately call him a fugitive from San Francisco, but he may have been wanted by a few unsavory characters. But he was a restaurateur, and he found this little place he could buy and open up a restaurant. And in those days, it was more than a restaurant. There was gambling and other things that
Gambling
maybe
in Casablanca? I'm shocked.
well, and more than that, if you will. But you know, what do hardworking single men want to do on a Saturday night? Well, if they run out
Play
of money.
dominoes.
Well, that's it. That's probably right. But anyway, Al the Wops has become a historical place. It has been through many owners, and nobody wants to change it. You can still get peanut butter with your grilled steak and you know, things like that. But it's a charming place. But there are a lot of charming places out there. And so, yes.
I had
So-
a
oh,
question.
go ahead.
Your first picture that you showed before you started talking, it was in Roseville, and it looked like an explosion.
I
and a
didn't
jet.
explain
I was
that.
wondering.
Oh,
about that one.
thank you. Yeah, I get so
Oh, it's
crazy
okay.
trying
I
to
just-
figure out what I'm going to say up here. Okay, so I got out of the Navy. I worked at this little paper. They were wonderful enough to hire me. And I was starting to love the news business. And I had some friends over on a Friday night, and we had a little bit of wine. And I remember waking up the next morning to a huge explosion. Now, I lived in the little town of Roseville, a block away from where I worked, the newspaper building, and a little duplex. And I woke up and I saw the curtains ruffling. I mean, it was a huge explosion. I kept the window open for fresh air. It was summertime. And what in the heck? And by the time I realized I was awake now and I was really alive, more explosions and big earth-shaking explosions. 1973, munitions train was going through the Roseville Railroad switching yards. Huge switching yards. Pacific Fruit Express was there, and freight switching and stuff. And I called. By then, I knew who to call. Watch commander. And, oh, Rich, yeah, this is going on. There's explosions. You can't go out there. You know, it's horrible. It's, you know, nobody knows why they're still going off or anything. So, well, news hound me. Okay, sure, thanks. And so I went out a back road that I knew to the. I could just see the smoke, And so I followed some roads that I knew, and there was a cop blocking the way, and I knew him. He was one of the town cops when I was a little boy growing up in Roseville. His name was Sam Zine, and he looked like the kind of guy that Sam Zine would be. You wouldn't want to tangle with him, but he was as nice can be, this older guy now by then. And I rolled up in my little 2-seat roadster car that I had then, and I said, "Hey, Sam, what's going on?" He says, "I don't know, but don't go any closer." And stuff is, just blowing up, a mile away from us. And I said, "Oh, I got to get closer. I got to get some pictures." "Okay, but just don't get too close." So he let me through the roadblock because he knew me, and he even remembered me as a little guy. It's a great town, great small town America.
Yeah.
And so I drove out there, and I got that picture that you saw, and stuff is raining down all over me. And I said, "Okay, everybody's right. I'm getting out of here." And stuff was landing all around me. So I got in my car, and I remember just throwing it in reverse. And because there was stuff I didn't want to drive over, so I just drove fast in reverse, and then I could turn around and get out of there. So that's what that was. And I just timed it right.
Great
for,
story.
Great story.
Wow.
Great photo, too.
Yeah, thank you.
So what was the Navy doing in Antarctica, doing aerial photographs? What did they want you to photograph?
I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, so I left all that, the Naval Air Station stuff, and that was a training ground for pilots and all of that. And a mentor of mine, we were talking about mentors, and he had been to Antarctica. He had actually wintered over in Antarctica, and said, "Rich, this will be my 3rd time back." He said, "It's the best duty you're ever going to have in the Navy." And it's a peacetime operation. We're totally in support of the United States Antarctic Research Program, and I'm going back and I'm going to run the aerial photo mapping part of the squadron. Now they had a photo department division in that squadron to do ground scientific work and stuff, and I thought, yeah, it'd be kind of fun to do. But he said, "No, I need you on the HERC to run the system," and so. But I don't know anything about aerial photography. Well, good, because we'll teach you. So, anyways, he gave me a phone number to call at the bureau, personnel bureau in Washington D.C. And I called the guy, got his name, the name so and so, and I told him who I was, and he says, "Oh, Turner, your reputation precedes you." And I didn't even have to ask the question. He said, "You're in. I'll send you your orders." And so I got into VXE-6 was the squadron that flies those. We had 5 Hercs of that big-tailed airplane that you saw. 5 of those. We had something like 6 or 8 helicopters and all the people that it takes to run all of that stuff. And our job was to support the scientific work going on in the Antarctic. And that means flying cargo and people and fuel to outlying stations. And that was our job. And then my collateral, since I'm a Navy photographer, that's my rating, that's my insignia on my sleeve. But here I was an air crewman, and that came first if we weren't doing photographic work. But when we did aerial photo mapping, we had a USGS, Geological Survey guy, with a navigator up front so that they would put us where they wanted the mapping. And my system was 3 cameras, 1 straight down and 2 this way. The negatives were 9 inches square.
Wow.
A roll of film weighed 25 pounds.
Those were the days.
100-foot rolls of film. And it was a real technical job. It wasn't a creative job. And that's what I was happy to be finished with it after 2 years. And I was also, I guess I was done with the Navy because I was raising a family, and I had a great time. I was making okay money, and but then I just thought, 2 years at a time away from the family is not going to be the way I want to live. So it was time to leave the Navy, and that's when I went into the newspaper business.
That's interesting. So you're still, in a way, in the business. You're a publisher of an online magazine. You haven't even mentioned Soundings.
Oh, yeah, Soundings.
Tell us about that. You started that before the pandemic.
I did. We launched it. Me, myself, and I, we launched it. I had an idea. Newspapers are dying. And what I loved most about the newspaper business was, editors say, well, the sports department is the toy department of the newspaper. Well, I'm a pretty good sports photographer, but it wasn't my favorite. What I loved doing were the features. go out with feature writers, meet people to do stories about, and listen to them tell their stories. Quick, for instance, I mean, I could digress all day, and I'll try not to do that, but, I got an assignment slip. Go out and take a picture of so-and-so. He's got a sailboat in his driveway. I don't know anything about what's going on. And I didn't have a reporter with me. I just went out and thought, okay, I'm going to take a picture of some guy in front of his sailboat in his driveway. I have no idea. I got to talking to this guy, and he was a number two director of the school district in town. And he was due to retire in a couple of years. And he bought this hull of a sailboat, and he was a good woodworker. He just bought the hull of this like 30-foot sailboat. It had a keel and everything. It was sitting in his driveway, a little subdivision house. But he was a good woodworker. He and his wife were building out that ship, or the boat, I'll call it, teak wood and interior. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. And I thought, whoa, here's a story. I mean, here I got this little slip of like a mugshot. You know what a mugshot is for a newspaper, but this was so much more. So I came back with all that I had learned, and the editor went nuts. Oh gosh! I said, yeah, gosh.
You are a photojournalist.
We got to follow these guys, and so we did. And so, then the editor got involved, and then they launched the boat. I was there, and watching it go into the water, and they're crying, after all this work, and he's retired, and they're going to sail the world. They sold their house, and they're going to sail around the world. So the editor talked them into sending postcards. Little stories, where are you, well, we're in Tahiti, a postcard from Tahiti, and he was good enough that he could write the stories, and he would send them into the editor. That was before, it was probably snail mail in those days. But yeah, so those are the stories that I fell in love with doing as a photographer, and it's pictures that tell stories, and pictures that maybe need some words to help tell the stories. So I did a book called Delta Grandeur. It was a small art project. It's not a big circulation book. Some of the pictures you saw are in that book, but then it became a traveling museum exhibit where I could write the narratives to go with the stories, or with the pictures. So that kind of gave me, this was 2015, but you asked me about soundings. But so,
I did.
So I'll get back to that. So the reason I launched Soundings was to fill a gap that I was missing. And I could get writers to tell these stories. And if I could do the photography and maybe do some of my own stories too, I can spell a little bit, and I wouldn't try to sell my writing as writing per se, but over the years I hang out with good writers, and kind of gives me an idea that I kind of like to help tell my own stories a bit too. So I've got some photo essays of mine that'll be in this book that I did for Delta Grandeur. But Delta Grandeur exhibit traveled California for 5 years.
I was going to ask that. You had a museum exhibit that traveled all around.
For 5 years, and it started at the San Joaquin County Historical Society and Museum, and I took them the concept. I just got this wild idea that I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do a museum exhibit, but I think it should be done. So I took the concept to the managers of that museum, and I showed them some pictures, and the curator and the director looked at each other and said, okay, we're in. Okay, so this gave the project a home,
That's
but
fantastic.
then I don't have enough money to do it. So how do I do this? So I had to go out and get sponsors to do it.
Wow. So the museum didn't sponsor it, really, although they use their connections to help public travel.
Well, here's how I used the museum. Well, we have a place that this is going to premiere. So if you give me the money to do it, then we're going to have this exhibit that's going to help tell this Delta story. So I was able to get good sponsors.
And that's critical to their mission. That's who they are.
That's
really.
who they are, exactly. And it's a nonprofit and all of that. But anyway, so fast forward to this project, they're partners with me on this. And this is a nonprofit endeavor.
Soundings.
Well, Soundings is not. We're still talking about Soundings. Well,
No,
so
please
now,
go ahead.
So now we're fast forwarding to this book. And backing up a little bit, some of you might remember Senator Lois Woke. She, part of state senator, her district covered much of the Delta. And I just called her staff one day and said, gee, I'm doing all these pictures. I'd like to help if I can. And I'm not trying to sell you anything. But anyway, one day, in that meeting, she said, would you consider hanging your work in the Capitol? And I said, well, sure I would, but that's expensive. Do you have any money? I mean, I can't, and this was 2008, whoops, and, businesses were kind of not
Tough
doing,
times, yeah.
well, as a sole proprietor, it was a little bit tough, so I couldn't put up any of my own money to do that. And I felt like I was dead in the water. I really did. And one morning I woke up in the dark thinking, wait a minute, tennis players get endorsements, baseball players get their signatures on gloves, race car drivers have STP stickers all over their outfit. Maybe I can get sponsors to help me do this, to help tell this Delta story. So I made a phone call and I got a sponsor. Yes.
Let him get his mic.
Okay.
When and where can we buy the book?
The book is in progress. The book won't be out until probably next spring.
Okay.
And we're still fundraising for it. The partnership I have with the museum is I have to raise all the money to do it, but the money goes to them, but they can't help raise the money because it's kind of a conflict of interest. This is a separate project, but it's under their, auspices. They're endorsing it. We're partners, and all of that. So, but yes, we're still fundraising for it.
One more question.
Yes.
Do you, in the book, talk about the World War II ships parked off of the middle ground that were there after World War II?
Yes, well, the Port of Stockton, there was a lot of shipbuilding going on right at the Port of Stockton. And during World War II, there was also a prisoner of war camp there, and I think there was another POW camp out at the Stockton Airport. So there's all kinds of history we can talk about, and the more we talk about that, the bigger this book gets. So we have so much to choose from, and we're still in that process too. And also the Delta Protection Agency is helping me in terms of helping, I'll call them a steering committee in a sense. They don't have control over what I do, but they want to have influence, and I want their influence. And so I'm developing all these wonderful partnerships that I'm so excited to talk about.
Another question.
Thank you for asking these great questions. Yes.
How many miles of canals are there in the Delta?
About 1,100 navigable waterways.
So that means that there's 2,200 miles of shoreline?
If the math is correct, yeah.
How much of that is developed?
Very little.
Very little.
Now, Bethel Island, did I show a picture of Bethel Island in there? I think I did.
I remember.
Maybe I whipped through it too fast. But anyway, there was a development there that was stalled from economics, but they had it all dug out and all the docks were put in. It's very geometrical. And it's practically all built out now. I mean, the economy has changed. These are $1 million houses in the middle of the Delta.
And there's a risk of flooding, as we all know, if the levees fail.
But they're built up high enough. See, they've learned lessons over the years.
Right.
Yes, yes, those are built up high. You might have garages down here or whatever, but living quarters are upstairs, yeah.
So were you inspired by a particular photographer, perhaps Ansel Adams, or was that really, you just did your own thing and ran with it?
I think all of us are inspired, and I think when you're learning a trade, you look to your masters.
Yes.
Alfred Eisenstadt. I grew up reading, I say as a Cub Scout, and I say read, but that's a lie. Life magazine. See, in those days, I didn't want to read long stories. I could look at the pictures. Life magazine gave me the idea that pictures could tell stories. Now, I was too young to figure that out at the time, but I would race home, latchkey kid, race home. Thursdays is when we got the magazine, and by the time everybody else got home, I was finished with it. But and then I grew up wanting to do photography, but not in a way that I thought of making a living at it. It was just kind of a hobby, and then, of course, the Navy we talked about. But
for the Navy, you wouldn't have been a photographer necessarily.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. And that lieutenant is a man I want to go back and shake his hand if I could find him. And also that publisher, Carmela Martin, she's long gone now too. But she had the right. We talk about unsung heroes, and those are mine, and they're asking me to cut my throat now. So
are you mentoring other people? Do you have apprentices, or how do you pass your
I do
craft
guest
along?
speaking. Here's a quick. I could do this all day. So I moved to Stockton, and I thought, well, it's about time I learned something about journalism since I work for a full-time daily newspaper, right?
It's
so
about
I took
time.
night courses at Delta College.
Oh, did you?
Okay, so not only that, well, gee, so the instructor and I got to be great friends. He's an ex-journalist, so now we're pals. He's an instructor, I'm a working journalist. And so he would ask me out to do guest speaking all the time. And I'm saying, dude, you're lazy, man. I mean, you ought to give me the paycheck and you go somewhere, So we were pals. But anyway, I was doing a guest speaking thing. And years later, I had a show at the Hagen Museum, and I called it it was a retrospective about 2 years ago. And at the end of it, a bearded guy, looked like a mountain man, and I didn't recognize him. He came up, shook my hand, and he said, Rich, I'm a photographer. I live up in Jackson. And he said, I'm a photographer because of you. And I said, why? Why? And he said, well, you were speaking at Delta College, and I saw the work that you were doing, and I left that room thinking that that's the kind of work that I want to do. So he said, thank you. So I guess I've mentored some people. Maybe
You never know who you're going to touch.
You don't.
You don't know. It's amazing. In this room, we do already have photographers.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
And it's unintentional,
Yeah.
But then if I went back and talked to those people that I just named, I'll bet they wouldn't remember the encounter like I do.
Right, of course they
they're
wouldn't.
just being themselves. And
That Navy guy, he had 1 million guys out in the hallway waiting for him.
Yeah, he says, get out of here. You send
You're a
the next guy."
photographer, too.
Yeah, see ya. So it was a done deal. So, yeah, I've had a great life, and I'm still having it.
I just have another question. I noticed in some of your pictures, like in Sheila's bar, there were old pictures on the wall. And I wonder if that's something to mine also, if you want to find that old Chinese settlement, or, that's a whole other project. You're
it
busy
is.
creating.
You can
but
go
that
off
legacy of those old pictures is amazing, the
Exactly.
secrets they might hold, and yours too.
Exactly. And speaking of Locke, there is
Like you didn't notice the ducks in that picture. It's like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's a discovery every time I look at these pictures that I shoot. So, but in Locke, there's a community center. There's a museum there. There's all kinds of history. Go visit. Honestly, do it. And another thing. So I'm giving an artist talk at UC Merced to go with the Delta Grandeur exam. And toward the end, a student spoke and said, I was born and raised here in Merced in the Central Valley. I never heard of the Delta. And he said, thank you for bringing this. And he says, where would you recommend that I take my family up there on a day trip? And that sparked a whole big conversation among everybody who was there. Everybody had someplace they thought that guy should go.
Well, that motel with the 3
there
buildings.
you go. It's gone. That's where Tom Joad slept once. But anyway,
So you opened part of his own world to him that he just couldn't see.
Yeah.
People
exactly.
drive around sometimes, they don't realize what's right there in front of them. You have the eyes, you see.
Well, we hope.
And you can help other people.
And I just go out there with no preconceived notions, and I find things, so. There's always stories to tell. So
it's a great way to go through life. You're open, you see, and
Yeah.
Well, what a pleasure. We could continue for several more hours,
I think
happily.
we
But
could.
what a pleasure. Thank you for coming down and talking with us. Thank you so much.
My
Rich
pleasure.
Turner,
Thank you.
photojournalist, publisher, museum
much.
guy, everything. Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.